Does Castlevania 2 suck? At least one angry nerd has said, yeah, it sucks. But to what extent can you trust the opinions of an angry person? Plus, if he's right, how many other classic games actually suck? Final Fantasy? Ninja Turtles? Anyway, today we're going to shed some light on Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest for the NES. And it's not the best, it's kind of a mess, but don't stress. Wait! What's up, nerds? I'm Longy Long, the Ghetto Gamer. Every week I'll go cruising them back streets to find you the cheapest, bestest, and most goodestest games to help you grow your retro collection without going broke. If that sounds like something you might be into, think about hitting that subscribe button so you'll know when I publish new material. Anyway, this week we're talking about a fairly controversial title called Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest for the NES. Now I say it's controversial because a few years ago, a young YouTuber, a budding YouTuber that called himself the Angry Nintendo Nerd, decided that this game actually sucks, that the cryptic puzzles and the general unfairness of the game meant it actually wasn't good and we were all being duped into thinking it was good, and it's actually an insult to the entire gaming community. But the answer to whether or not this game sucks is kind of nuanced, and we're going to have to get in there and play it. Let's check it out. Like a lot of sequels, and especially NES sequels, Castlevania 2 tried something new, and opinions were mixed. Like Zelda 2 and Mario 2, the reception on release was pretty positive, and most of us just sort of accepted the new changes. But as the franchises evolved, these sequels started to be looked at in a different light. While the actual gameplay and controls stayed pretty similar to the original, Konami decided to try a different approach in the exposition and the way players actually progressed through the game. Castlevania 2 puts players in an open world where they're free to explore at will. Compare that to the original Castlevania, where players move forward through each stage, one at a time, fighting a boss, moving on to the next. There's no backtracking. Simon's Quest took a hint from Metroid. Obviously, this wasn't the last time that would happen, but this set that precedent, and it probably could have been better implemented. Players were free to roam until they encountered an obstacle that required a specific item or a stronger weapon or whatever, and they had to turn around and backtrack, just like Metroid. However, Metroid did a really good job of making it obvious what items did and how they worked. The puzzles were solvable with a bit of thinking. It seems like the developers of Simon's Quest didn't quite have the same knack for subtlety that Nintendo did. Puzzles are blatantly unfair and, at times, intentionally cryptic, like the classic example where you have to equip a red crystal and kneel at this wall. Where Konami really messed up is in the way they dropped clues to help players solve the puzzles. Or didn't. Or at least didn't translate them properly, so players couldn't figure out what the NPCs were trying to tell them, how they're supposed to progress through the game, and in the pre-Google days, that was a fatal flaw. This game plops you out into the world, naked and slimy, and it's up to you to figure out what the oak stake is for, which crystal goes in which mansion, which tombstone to drop garlic next to. And of course there's the town people, which tell you worthless stuff that may or may not even be true, and you have no way of knowing. And then there's the day-night cycle, which so burned the angry nerd's butt. Yeah, it really is annoying. So Castlevania 2 has plenty of flaws. But is it that bad? Really? Eh. When you get right down to it, it's still very satisfying to whip the dickens out of these chickens. Whoopah! And that's great because there is a lot of grinding in this game, which I hate, but I'm trying to defend this game, so just ignore that. In their later Metroidvania games, Konami would get this down to a science. But in Simon's Quest, grinding for hearts and purchasing items is tedious, especially because of the day-night cycle that reduces heart production by half the game, and even then you can't go to town to buy stuff till morning comes, assuming you live that long. I'm trying to defend you! Anyway, this game definitely has its quirks, and many of them are bad. But the gameplay is the same unfairly difficult Castlevania platforming we had in the first and third games, so don't try complaining about that. And while the open world concept didn't quite take off here, it definitely set the groundwork for the direction the franchise would take. Later Metroidvania games would employ the map system and pretty shamelessly borrow from Super Metroid to great effect, and I don't think we'd have that if Simon's Quest didn't dare to be different. And I can't finish this review without talking about the awesome music. Castlevania 2 features some of my absolute favorite 8-bit music. In the hierarchy of great 8-bit music, it goes like this: Mega Man 2, Castlevania 2, other stuff 2. You know, I started this video to try to defend Simon's Quest against haters, but it's harder to do than I thought it was going to be. I loved this game as a kid. My son was almost named Simon, after this character. No kidding. Simon's Quest was also my first Castlevania, and even though it was poorly implemented, I think they were on the right track by having the open world. When I went to play other games in the series that didn't have that, I felt like it was a step backwards. And before I go, I just want to say that to review games today, you've got to review them for today. Now, when Castlevania 2 came out, there was no Google, there was no YouTube, so to figure out how to solve the crazy puzzle, you had to buy the book, you had to buy the magazine, or whatever. Today, okay Google, how do I beat Castlevania? She's on it. So in 2017, condemning a game for its cryptic puzzles is harder to do than it was back in the 80s. Plus, I love Castlevania 2, and nothing you say will ever tear us apart. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, there's something broken inside you. But go ahead and hit the subscribe button to see when I publish new content. If you can't wait for new content, check out my backlog or find me on Twitter or Patreon at longy_long. Also check me out on indiewatch.net, where I post all kinds of game reviews plus independent game developer articles. So, till next time, nerds, just keep it ghetto. The answer is kind of nuanced, and we're going to have to take a much closer look at this. Stay tuned, nerds. Let's check it out.